Hey guys, Jacob here. This is going to be my first Tu6 build video. This is going to be covering my new crit/raid DPS PVE build. A few people have been wanting to see this for a while, so I've decided to try to get this build as best as possible for Tu6. I did make a build previous to this, which was in Tu5, which was the Wyvern crit build for the raid. This version's a little bit different due to the fact that there's pieces in this update which we didn't have in the previous update, and I can make this build to the original version I wanted to make it. Now, this is what the build looks like. It's based around 3-piece DNH, 1-piece Wyvern, 1-piece Murakami, and Fenris, which is going to be the main piece this build was based around. Now, the primary and secondary of this weapon, which I will cover, but the main primary is going to be the Eagle Bear, hitting at 25.9. If you guys are not familiar, this is a weapon that actually drops in the raid. Most people are familiar with that, but if you're not and you're new to the game, this is the weapon you get by going to the raid multiple times. You might get it first try, you might get it second, or it might take you 30 to 40 times. I know people who've been trying to get this weapon who've run the raid probably over 50 times plus and still haven't gotten it. But I will go through the talents so you guys know what they are. Eagle Strike, accuracy increases as you constantly fire up to 100%. Headshots kills grant 100% reload speed, 50% damage, and tenacity buff for 10 seconds. The strength of tenacity is increased by 1% for body shots and 5% for headshots. Now, this is tenacity, which is the second talent. 40 to 80% of damage taken is delayed until the buff expires. All the total delayed damage is reduced for each enemy killed, while the buff is active up to 100% with 3 kills. Now, protected fire is the holstered. While holstered, gain 10% bonus armor while firing your current weapon. Now, the optics on this, which is going to be the Eagle Sight, which is 10% crit chance. The magazine is 30 plus rounds. The Talon Grip, which is 10% stability. And the Jagged Beak is 15% crit damage. Now, if you guys didn't have the Eagle Bear, don't worry. You can use a different gun on this. Most of the guns, like this gun actually got a nerf, which was like a 15% damage reduction, so it's not going to be hitting as hard as it was in Tu5. So you actually have a few options, like for example, the second one, which I'm going ahead and get out of the way already, which is going to be the custom P416. They did nerf this by 5%, but you guys can see the damage here. It still works really well. If I don't use the Eagle Bear, this is the gun I usually use, due to the fact it's probably one of my favorite guns to still use in this game, and it still works. Now, the difference between this one, this you have to go through the raid to get this one, but the P4, you can guys actually acquire this, way easier than the Eagle Bear. You guys can actually, farm for this for assault rifles and just pick it up. But you could always use something like the AKM as well if you don't have a P4. There's also a few new options, like you could use the FAMAS if you wanted to, but I think the P416 is a little bit better. But if you want to have RPM, you could always use the FAMAS, or if you want a little bit more damage, you could always use the AK. Now, the difference between the P416 and the Eagle Bear, which is the talents, obviously, you can change the talents pretty much whatever you want. One, obviously, not all of them. But on here, I have 5% crit damage, which is going to be strained, which is 5% crit damage is gained for every 10% of your armor that is depleted. Allegro, which is 10% rate of fire. Zen, while equipped, resting in cover for 3 seconds, removes blind and disorient status effects. And the attachments on here are way different. You can change your attachments on high-end weapons. You have the 8% damage to elites, the 20 plus rounds magazine, the 5% crit chance, and the 5% damage to elite muzzle. So you can get a little bit more DT on this weapon if you want to go for this weapon instead of the Eagle Bear, or if you don't have it, or if you do have it and you don't want to use Eagle Bear, you could always use the P4. It's still a pretty good weapon. Now, for the main secondary, I will cover and go into detail on as well, which I don't usually use a P4 because I don't run two of the same weapon, is going to be my M1A or the Ekham's Long Stick Perfect Ranger, but mostly the M1A. But this weapon is hitting at 95.5. I mostly use this while I'm at a generator, or if I run out of ammunition, or if there's an enemy at a distance, I can go into cover and shoot them a little bit easier because it's is a rifle after all, and I can hit enemies a little bit further across the playing field. Now, the talents on this are Strained, Extra, and Rhythm. I want to change Strained to Ranger, but for the longest time I could not find a M1A that had Ranger already on it, or find a rifle that had Ranger, and I finally found one, so I'm going to be changing that a little bit later on. Extra, which gives you 20% magazine capacity, and Rhythm, while equipped, enemy kills have a 5% chance to refresh active skill cooldowns, can occur once every 60 seconds. The attachments on this weapon are 5% damage to elites, which is the C79 scope, so I can zoom in a little bit. The plus 5 rounds in the tightly packed marksman mag, and 10% stability on the angled grip. Now, you can't put a mod on the M1A. I will tell you guys that now. It only has 3 mods. Just remember, you cannot put a muzzle due to the fact it's a classic, kind of like the classic AK. Now, to the sidearm, which is the Orbit pistol, which is a named pistol you guys can acquire in the open world. I pretty much got this, last time I checked, I got this in the DZ. I don't know if it's a DZ exclusive, but that's where I got mine. I found it on a dead dude, honestly, who I killed, but that's where I got it. Perfect finisher. Swapping from this weapon within 10 seconds of killing an enemy grants 40% crit chance and 50% crit damage for 15 seconds. Optimized, which is 15% weapon handling, and overlap, which is while holstered gain 5% weapon handling for your current weapon. 20% reload speed on the revolver drum, and 10% damage to elites on the short scope. So if a red bar or like a yellow bar even are almost dead, you can pop them with this and swap back to your main gun and get the 40% crit chance and 50% crit damage for 15 seconds and just hit, Razor, hit Boomer, hit pretty much any boss you're fighting, or even in PVE if you want to, shoot an NPC and then swap back to your current weapon and get the extra crit damage and crit chance. Now for the pieces, I'm running 3-piece DNH, like I said, which I'll cover those first. The DNH mask, which is not the perfect concussion, which is the one right here. This is just a normal DNH mask with 54% damage to elites, 4% crit chance, and hard hitting. This is where you're going to get all of your DTE from, unless you're running a P416 or a high-end weapon that you can get DTE attachments on it, like the P416 like I showed, but the Eagle does not have any attachments, so you're not going to get DTE from your weapons, so this is the main source you're going to get DTE from. Now the backpack is rolled for 14% crit damage, 24,000 health, 12,000 armor with Spark and Vital. Spark is a new talent if you guys are not familiar with it. Damaging enemies with skills or explosives grants 15% weapon damage for 15 seconds. Vital, which has been buffed to 25% health. The mod on this is a 1.5 weapon damage, 4% assault rifle damage, and 2% marksman rifle damage. These mods are actually currently for sale in the Beast of Under at the front desk. If you guys want to pick these up for yourselves, I bought these due to the fact I use weapon damage, or assault rifle damage, and marksman rifle damage on most of my builds, because I usually run a marksman rifle or a rifle in general, which does not really help, but I decided to buy these due to the fact they're really high assault rifle damage. But if you guys have like 6%ers, obviously go with those. Now, the knee pads are DNH, which is the 8.5% crit chance, and Composure, which is also a new talent. Wall and cover grants 10% total weapon damage, which requires 11 or more, so you're going to need 11 reds to get this talent procced. An offensive mod with 4% assault rifle damage, 2% marksman rifle damage, and 1.5% weapon damage. Now, the reason I'm using DNH is the fact you get 5% accuracy, 10% crit damage, and 7% crit chance. So you can stack a little bit more crit with this. You could use Wyvern if you want to, but I'm using DNH due to the fact I have better DNH pieces than I do Wyvern. So that's kind of why I'm going with that, and also to get a little more crit damage. Now, the Fenris chest piece I'm using is the Ferocious Calm chest piece, which this is the named high-end chest piece. It has 15% weapon damage rolled on there, 3.5% crit chance, and 23,000 health. You guys can obviously use like a better chest piece if you have one that has like 10% weapon damage, and you could roll like 16% crit chance on there, or crit damage, increase that a little bit more if you wanted to, or just increase the health. Reason I'm using this because Perfect Berserk, which is 10% weapon damage for every 20% of max armor that is depleted. This does require 7 or more. Insulated, which is 30% hazard protection, and I'm using 2% weapon damage, 3% assault rifle, and 1% damage to armor. If you don't have the Perfect Berserk chest piece, you guys can always use like the normal one, which is right here, which is 8%. You're probably going to use something like this, so you can get offensive, your Vital, Berserk, and your weapon damage and crit chance, which also works as well. Now, the holster, which is Wyvern, you're getting 7% crit damage, 13% crit chance, 10% crit chance from surgical, so you're actually getting 23.5 there just from that piece in general, and 7% crit damage from the holster as the brand set bonus. And the 4% assault rifle, 2% marksman rifle, and 1.5% weapon damage on this mod. Now, the main idea of this build was to get as much damage as possible, which I will show you guys in a minute. But first, I will show you the skills I'm using and why I'm using them, just to get that out of the way. I'm using the Striker Drone for Spark, which I'll tell you guys a few other ways you can activate Spark. But this is mostly just to shoot NPCs and proc Spark, and that's really about it. Next is going to be the Kim Launcher, which is the healer one, which pretty much is the reinforcer to heal yourself while you're in combat or in cover. You could always use patience if you want to make a patience build, or somehow put patience into this, which you could do pretty easily. You would just have to change the knee pads, use the 2 mods in there and a blue, and you pretty much have it because it's pretty easy to get. Next, I will show you guys how this build works and the reason why I designed it like this. When you guys go into cover, you will see that composure obviously procs while you're in cover. Berserk is gone, which I took it off before I started the video, which you can damage yourself right there. So Berserk is procced, and if you have something like this P416, which has strained, and you have something like Spark, which you can obviously proc by using your drone or throwing a grenade. So you're going to get the damage from Spark, which is 15, and it's always going to keep proccing long as your turret stays alive and keeps proccing. You can see there in the left little tiny corner down there, it keeps going up. Composure gives you 10% damage, and you're going to get strained, which is right here. So you can get 5% crit damage for gain for every 10% of your armor that's depleted. So if your armor is gone, you're going to get crit damage from this, and this is a named target on normal. This isn't heroic, this is normal. So I will show you guys what the DPS on it is right here. That's 2.3, which I will reset so you guys can see a little bit easier. It's 1.5, so that was me shooting it with an extra mag. It's 2 mil again. 2.3, and I will show you guys how it hits with the Eagle Bear. Okay, that's just a few examples right there so you guys can see it. Now I will show you guys the crit chance and the crit damage on this build, which I'll start with the Eagle Bear first, which I'll scroll down right here. 57% crit chance, 71% crit damage. You're getting 40% stability because I'm using sharpshooter. If you guys are shooting like the the crate on the the little wall there on Razorback, if you want to use this on Razor, or if you're going to switch using sharpshooter, you guys make duplicate builds and just change them while you're going to go to each area. But you can use this for stability to hit your targets a little bit easier. But if you're using the sharpshooter, you're going to get this. But if you're using survivalist, you're not going to get the stability unless you're using like overlap. You'll get a little bit more weapon handling. Assault rifle damage bonus, which is 51%. All weapon damage bonus is 26%. The DTE is 79%, which I wish it was 80. If I had one more, I'd be at 80, but I'm at 79, so that worked just fine. And if you want to have a little bit higher DTE, you can always use the P416. And I'll show you guys the DTE on this, which is at 92%, due to the fact you have 2 more mods that give you a little bit more DTE. So overall, if you guys use this build, you can stack Composure with Berserk and Spark. One more thing I will note, if you don't really want to use the drone and you want to use like a Revive Hive in case you're afraid you're going to get down in the raid, you can always take off the Eagle Bear and use the Merciless, which I'll show you guys real quick, which I'll destroy the drone. If you just shoot, use your P4, you can actually proc Spark by just shooting NPCs, because you have a 5% chance to activate it, which I'll show you guys real quick as well, which is the holster talent Brutality. While holstered, landing a shot has a 5% chance to deal 100% damage as explosive damage. So you can pretty much use your P4, your AK, and just keep proccing, which might take a second, but it procs, as we'll see here. Sometimes you have to switch the weapon and you can just shoot. Yeah, like boom, right there. You can just shoot him a little bit and proc it, then switch back to your other weapon and just go through the NPCs. But it has a 5% chance to proc when you're using your normal gun. But that's gonna be about it, guys, for the video. I know it was really quick and pretty simple. Like I said, this build, it has really low armor and really low health. So if you're using Berserk and you can get a little bit better health rolls, I recommend doing that and getting it a little bit higher. But this build is mostly designed to be in cover and use Composure and Spark and try to do as much damage as you can to the bosses, and trying to stay out of NPCs' ways as much as possible and just ripping through them at a distance, or if they get right in your face, using Berserk. and just ripping through with that. You could always use clutch with this build as well, which is something I've been thinking about doing, which does require 4 or less. So if you want to use clutch, you can use clutch, so that way you get 20% missing health and you won't die as fast if you're trying to face tank enemies in the raid or PVE, which is something you guys can also do. But that's going to be about it, guys. Thank you all for watching. Make sure you guys subscribe for more Division 2 content, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one.